أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of God, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Respected sisters, dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The world is an ideological battlefield. It is an arena where ideas, visions, theories, worldviews, values are constantly in tension and in conflict with each other. In every aspect, in every dimension of human activity, this is a battle that is going on. From the most mundane and trivial aspects of our lives to the deepest, most complex questions, there are different theories, different worldviews, different opinions, and each one of them tries to claim to be the truth. Each one of them tries to gain more adherents, more followers, more believers. Each one of these ideas is trying to get you on board, to be one more supporter of that idea. This applies, as we said, to every dimension and every aspect of human life. From what we eat, to how we dress, to our interaction with nature, to the meaning and understanding of what is a family or marriage, how we're supposed to manage our money, and so on and so forth. And this is just to talk about the things that perhaps are more trivial in daily life. Then when we go to things that are deeper and more fundamental, such as what is right and wrong? Who decides what is right and wrong? What is good and evil? Who decides? How we decide that? What is the purpose of life? For each one of these questions, we see a whole slew of different opinions, values, theories, worldviews that are usually in conflict with each other. And the greatest and most fundamental and most impactful of these questions is the question of the existence of God. The reason why it's the most important is because every other question depends on it. Depending on the answer, depending on the position that you take with regards to the existence of God, your entire worldview changes. Every other question that we just mentioned, and hundreds or thousands like it, are in fact derivatives of that question. They derive out of the question of whether God exists or not. If my answer is that God does exist, then my answers are going to follow. Therefore, I will eat this way, and I will dress that way, and I will talk this way. And this is for someone who truly understands the ramification of saying God exists. My understanding of what is good and evil changes. What is right and wrong changes. How I act in every instant in this world is going to change, because now there is a God, and there is an afterlife, and there's a judgment. Everything changes because of that. And on the other side, if you say there is no God, then as a result, domino effect, the repercussion is all of those answers are also going to change. Each one of these answers is going to put you on a different path. And then there are those who stay in limbo. They don't reach a conclusion. They don't say God exists, and they don't say God does not exist. So they stay in limbo. And eventually, a human being who stays in limbo, this is going to show in their life. There's an anxiety that comes from a lack of meaning in your life. There's an anxiety that comes from not being able to found your life and your actions and your beliefs on a stable foundation. Things are always in doubt. Things are always uncertain. Things are always open to being questioned. This is a very quick, very short introduction to this very deep topic. This is not something, sometimes these days we hear that this is something that is starting these times. Life is getting more complicated. These battlefields, these battles between worldviews, theories, values are intensifying, getting more difficult. This existed since day one that we've had human beings. The Holy Quran tells us that the father of humanity as we know it, our humanity, is Adam alayhi salam, Prophet Adam. The Quran tells us about his two sons, Habil and Qabil. The narrations tell us about their names. Their names are not mentioned in the Quran. The Quran tells us that each one of these two men had an entirely different worldview. You all know the story. They had a conflict. Usually when there's a tension, when there's a conflict, when things are going well, nothing happens. It's when there's a tension that you're going to get to the bottom of things. You're going to see the reality come out. There was a tension between them. Therefore, there's action. There's a position that will be taken. When the tension happened, when the difficulty happened and they had a disagreement, one of them told the other, Qabil told Habil, I'm going to kill you. And Habil said, if you are going to raise your hand to kill me, I will not raise my hand to kill you. I fear God. In his worldview, there is a God. In the worldview of Qabil, he may say with his mouth and with his words, there's a God. He sure did not act like there's a God. His worldview is different, his actions are going to be different. He killed his brother. Day one, from the first human beings, you see the ramifications of this. Different worldviews, different theories, different values, depending on what you take and what you adopt at the theoretical level, you're going to see the repercussions of that at your action level, at your practical level. One thing that sometimes people miss is that they think, by not thinking about things, by not really spending time and energy and effort going through this, that you can be safe, that you don't need to worry about a worldview. You're not taking a position, you're neutral. That in itself is taking a position. That in itself is a worldview. And it's not always the safe one. Inshallah, as we talk more over the next nights, we don't have a lot of time today, we'll talk about worldviews. There are worldviews today that are creeping into every aspect of our lives. When we talk about neoliberalism, what is it based on? How did we get here? What does it mean that we say it's expansionist, it's imperialist, it's colonialist? What does that mean? Do we mean that we need to also take a position towards this? Sometimes I don't know. By buying a certain thing or supporting a certain cause, I'm also benefiting a worldview and everything behind it. And by not doing so, I may be benefiting another. Or, in some cases, I may be harming one or another. I can't be oblivious to this. Every decision that I make is supporting some cause and is being harmful to another. I can't be naive and innocent to the point of pretending that all of this is not happening. Okay? The conclusion that we want to reach from this introduction is that, inshallah, this is going to serve as the main theme running through the rest of the nights. This idea of the ideological battleground, that is the world. And this may seem that it's very stressful and very difficult and puts us at a loss and becomes confusing. In short, the answer, the solution that we want to provide, we're not going to say Islam is the solution. We're going to make it a lot more precise. We're going to give you a very condensed version of Islam. It has everything in it, but in a short summarized version. We're going to say that Karbala is a criterion. Karbala is going to be the distinction that is going to allow us to go through this life. This life that is an intellectual and ideological battlefield. I will go into this world equipped with my knowledge of Karbala, equipped with the values of Karbala. Okay, so this becomes our introduction and the momentum that inshallah we will use over the next nights. We said that the main, biggest, deepest, most impactful question that needs to be resolved is the question of the existence of God. So we're going to start from the beginning with the existence of God. Today, we live in a world where the existence of God is constantly questioned. This has gone on for a while. It was not always the case. Since a period in time, a very specific point in time, that began in Europe, that today we call the modern age. When the modern age started, there was a shift. This became the foundation upon which a lot of the worldview of today exists. What is that shift? From the time that Christianity entered into Europe, because Europe was mainly Christian, the worldview of the typical citizen in Europe is made up of a triad of three things. It is made up of God, religion, and revelation. God is the center of your worldview if you believe in the existence of God. Everything goes back to God. God becomes the source and the purpose. The system that you're going to live by and implement in your life is going to be religion. The means, the tool that you're going to use to know what you're supposed to do and to achieve this religious worldview is going to be revelation. It's a text, it's a scripture. The same exact pattern that we find in the other scriptural great traditions and faiths. Same thing in Islam, same thing in Judaism. The repercussion, practically, is that someone who adopts this worldview is going to be focused on the afterlife. Because they believe in an afterlife. And by comparison, when you look at this world versus the afterlife, you see that it only represents but a very tiny fraction of what is awaiting you there. In quantity, in quality, and so on and so forth. So this becomes your worldview. This was until the modern times. Events, socio-economic, political events, we don't have time to go through them now, led to huge revolutions and uprising in Europe that replaced this worldview with another worldview, the modern worldview. The triad was entirely replaced by another triad. God was removed and replaced by the human being. The source, the origin, the purpose of everything is now the human being. Hence the word humanism. The system that we are going to live by is going to be a scientific system, not religion. The tool that we will use is no longer going to be revelation, it's going to be reason. And therefore my focus as a human being is going to be this world. Because there is nothing but this world. And the human being is nothing but this body. The biological, chemical, physical interactions of this body equal the full human being. There is no soul. There is nothing beyond this body. These were the logical conclusions that led to what we call the modern era. Today's neoliberal way of seeing the world, especially in Western societies where we live, is based on this foundation. Okay? So we start with the beginning, and we start from the center. What about God? Is it true that it's impossible to be a scientist and to adopt your reason? And therefore, if you do that, is it still possible to believe in a God? Or are you now forced to let go of God and replace God with the human being? The human being becomes the be-all, end-all. The origin, the alpha, and the omega becomes the human being. I take everything from the human being and I give back to the human being. The ultimate purpose is a human being and the ultimate source is a human being. Is that true? If someone becomes a real scientist, a serious, high-level, high-caliber, at the highest level scientist, using reason. Now, no one can claim that this is not someone who understands what science is or reason is. Is it true that the ultimate conclusion of that is that, therefore, you remove God and you put the human being instead? So instead of lecturing to you about this, I thought I would share the names of 2 books with you. Inshallah, those 2 books become useful to those who are interested in these types of topics so that you can look into them a little bit further. The first of the 2 books is by a philosopher by the name of Antony Flew. He wrote his book in 2004. His book is called There Is a God. It's a very clever title or a very clever cover when you look at it, because the cover actually says there is no God, and then he slashed across the no and he wrote a. It's not, instead of there is no God, he wrote there is a God. Why? Who is Antony Flew? Antony Flew was born in 1923. And for his whole life, he was a philosopher, a high caliber philosopher, very well known in the world in the sphere of his activity. Philosophy with a specialization in the philosophy of religion. In that world, he was famous for one thing. Even though he spoke about other things, he wrote about other things, he was really known for one thing. And that's what the cover of his book actually says. He was known to be, if not the staunchest atheist in the philosophical world, at least one of the staunchest philosophers. The most stubborn, the most direct and clear and against the idea of theism, of believing in God. And that's why the title of his book, I will now read the full title of his book, There Is a God, How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Changed His Mind. That's the title of his work. When did he publish that work? He published it as soon as he changed his mind. What year? 2004. He was 81 years old. He goes through passages. I don't have time to read the quotes. I'm going to leave you the pleasure of going through the book and seeing what you conclude from it. See his own journey. When he was questioned about it later, how come you changed his mind? He said, I never changed my mind. I'm someone that I believe always followed the evidence. To him, the click happened when work on genetics began. You remember in year 2000, the United States officially launched the Human Genome Project. He released his book in 2004, and he talks about this. He says it's impossible. When we look at the amount of information contained in genes, when we look at the manner in which this physical substance has to encrypt the information and then decrypt it in order to be able to use it, at that level of complexity, it's impossible to conclude that there is no intelligence behind this. This was the key. He talks about other things, but that was the key. That was the transition point. He says, I always followed the evidence. To him, that was the evidence. Can someone claim that this is someone who doesn't know what he's talking about? Or that he doesn't have the reason and scientific understanding required to understand how modernity works, and therefore there should be no God? That this is not enough evidence? This man spent 81 years of his life publishing a whole host of books and articles and chapters and conferences. This was his work, his life's work. And it takes courage. At that age, I don't think anyone was expecting an 80-year-old man who is done with his long, very well-recognized career. He doesn't need to come out of retirement and tell the world, I've changed my mind. In fact, that could be embarrassing. It's very inspiring. It takes courage to do this. It puts you in a very vulnerable position. He still went ahead and did it. That's the first book that I thought I would share with you. The second book. The second book is from Francis Collins. So who's Francis Collins? This book was released in 2006. And the name of the book is The Language of God. Slightly different journey. This is a man who says, I grew up in a household where my parents identified as being Christians, but there was no trace of religion in my life, in our lives. Absolutely none. And then by the time he enters school and then university, he says, I was a full-fledged atheist. If anyone would ask me, I would say I'm an atheist, I do not believe in God. And he went into university, he's considered someone extremely smart, he went into quantum physics, and he says that later, when he looks at his life, I thought this point is extremely interesting, very much worth studying. He says, why was I really an atheist in university? It's like, today I can tell you why. The reason is because, not because I had studied the proofs and the arguments and I had taken a position. He said, I wanted to enjoy life. And I felt like my full student experience in university could not really be enjoyed if I knew there's this thing called God behind me all the time. Meaning that everything I want to do, I have to think about, yeah, but what does God want me to do here? That puts restrictions, it handcuffs me. I did not want to deal with that or even think about it in university, so I took a position from the beginning and I said, I'm an atheist. Close the door to that thinking, to that discussion. He says then later, the genetic work began, and I got a lot more interested in that. So what did he do? He switched fields to biology, and then eventually studied medicine, and he became a physician. So that kind of gives you his background and his intellectual capacity. He did not only just become a geneticist, he became one of the world-leading geneticists. In fact, he became the director of the Human Genome Project. When Bill Clinton presented this project, he had him beside him, and he gave him the stage. And he spoke, and he led this project for 13 years. He is considered to be one of the top scientists in the world, bar none. He was leading a team of thousands of scientists across 6 countries to decode the human genome. This is the background of this man. He says, one day, I was dealing with this patient, she was sick, and we were not really doing a good job at managing her pain. And I would go and see her and I didn't feel like it because she's constantly in pain. And we don't know what to do to alleviate that pain for her. So he says, I asked her, how come you seem to be positive and you're enduring all of this and life goes on? And she told him, it's because of what I believe. I believe in God. He gives me power to deal with all of this. And then the moment that changed his life. He says, and then she asked me, what do you believe in? And he said, I could not answer that question. I told her nothing, and I left. He's like, but that answer fell on me, shattered me, broke me. I could not think anymore. And the reason might be different. For me and you, we may think differently. For him, he considered himself to be a true scientist. And he says, for the first time in my life, I was not a scientist at all. I had failed as a scientist. I could not say what type of evidence I relied on to answer the most important and the most fundamental question in life. What else matters if I can't answer this question? So he goes on a journey. What's his journey? His journey is that he wants to establish his atheism on a rational foundation. He wants to find the best arguments to say, I am an atheist, with conviction, with confidence. The conclusion, he became one of the best known theists and believers in God in the world, and he wrote that book. And the main purpose of that book is to say that it is possible. In that book, he's not saying, come believe in God like me. His point in the book is different. He's saying, look, I am a serious scientist. This is the kind of accomplishments I have done. By the way, he went on to even greater accomplishments after the Human Genome Project. And I'm not going to talk about the genetics and all of that. I leave that to you guys. Basically, he is saying, I'm a serious scientist. I'm a height at the height of this academic complex discipline, no one can claim that I don't have a scientific mind, that I don't understand what to do with evidence, how to calculate and estimate and assess and evaluate evidence. And I am telling you, I am also a serious believer. In fact, he goes further in the book. He says, not only am I a believer in a God, because a lot of scientists stop there, I believe in something. No, he says, I believe in a transcendental God, meaning a God that is outside of our world. Because some people say the world itself is God, we are part of it, and He's part of us. No, God created the world. He's not part of the world. He believes in a transcendental God who cares about every individual. And he talks about it, and he says, if you were to ask someone, that's the sign. Let's not waste time talking semantics and philosophy. When you ask someone, and that's a question that they use in the scientific academy and elsewhere, to assess whether someone believes in God, what do they ask them? Do you believe in the existence of an entity to which you can pray and which can answer your prayers? That's the question. You don't need to get into the philosophy of it and all the different permutations of God. And this is the type of God that he believes in. He's not a deist, he's a theist. He believes in a personal God. Not the God of some philosophers, right? He doesn't know you exist. He doesn't care about you. He cares about, a system that emanates from him willfully or not. That's deism, that's not theism. Okay? So all of this to say, inshallah, with these two books in mind, you are well equipped to enter into this arena, to tackle this first question that we wanted to tackle, which brings us to this battlefield, this ideological battlefield that we have talked about. There's other things that are mentioned that we're going to skip over. I want to skip directly to Karbala. One of the biggest issues that people struggle with when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that they misunderstand God. They have a misconception about God. The God that they worship is not the God of Ahlul Bayt, is not the God of the Quran. And that's oftentimes one of the reasons why people leave religion altogether. If your God is an old man with a big beard sitting in the clouds, that probably is going to be a God that will lead you out of religion eventually. This is not the God that we worship. This is not our understanding of God. One of the best ways to understand who God is, to understand the qualities, the traits of this God, the relationship we're supposed to have with this God, go back to the ad'iyah of Ahlul Bayt. See what type of God do they talk about? What type of God do they have a relationship with? This is our chance. We're in Muharram. If you want to do some homework by yourself, one area I would tell you to definitely go into, take a little bit of time and read the dua of Imam AlHasany alayhi salam on the day of Arafah. With that focus, from that lens, what type of God does Imam AlHasany alayhi salam worships? What does he worship? Who does he worship? What kind of relationship and connection does Imam AlHasany alayhi salam have with that God? See how he talks to that God. He says at some point, "O Allah, it is you that I desire. You begun bestowing your blessings on me before I was even something that could be named. Then you made me inhabit the loins, safe from the dangers of time, through the ages and the years, moving from loin to womb, throughout the passage of days and centuries. You did not take me out of compassion for me." He's telling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you only took me out at the right time I was supposed to come out into this world. And out of kindness towards me, out of goodness to me. And then he says, you made me inhabit 3 darknesses, between the flesh and the blood and the skin. You did not make me witness my own creation. You did not leave any part of my affairs to me. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking care of us during this whole time. We don't exist. We're a fetus. Right? That's what Imam AlHasany is talking about. Then you took me out to a guidance that you had already spread to the world as a perfect and sound creature. And you safeguarded me in the cradle as a small child. And you sustained with provision through filling milk. And you made the hearts of those who take care of me tender towards me. And you put me in charge of merciful mothers. In the charge of merciful mothers. right? And then he continues much later, and this to me is a heart-wrenching part of the dua. The Imam says, because the Imam is reciting this during the pilgrimage, and he would recite this every year, and people would know. I don't have time to go through the description of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam when he would recite dua Arafah. At some point he says, O Lord, Lord of the sacred city and the holy monument, is talking about the Kaaba and everything around it, and the ancient house which you have surrounded with blessing and made a security to the people. Well, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, in that last year, he actually went to Mecca. He went to perform the pilgrimage, but he left. He left just a few days before being able to perform the pilgrimage. He sent two big messages by doing that. The reasons is that first, this is someone of the stature, the position, the rank of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. When he leaves in the middle of the season of pilgrimage, people will take notice. They should wonder, how can Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam leave in the middle of the pilgrimage and not finish? And the second reason is that the Imam is sending a signal, a message to the people, that there is something even more important than this ritual, this amazing act of worship in our religion, to perform the Hajj. As important as the Hajj is, there is something even more important. The Imam is going to leave. More important than performing your Hajj is to support your Imam, is to protect your Imam. He comes before the Hajj. No different than in Siffin when they raised the Qur'an and the people said the Qur'an is raised, we can't fight anymore. And Imam Ali alayhi salam told them, I am the Qur'an. You listen to me and I'm telling you this is a trick. They did not believe him and they stopped. And the battle was done when it could have been won. The Imam here is saying there is a superficial understanding of religion. As important as Hajj is, this is not the spirit of the religion. There is something deeper, and in this case, it was the Imam himself. This is the manner in which Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam left Mecca a few days before performing his pilgrimage. Why? Because Yazid had sent his orders that even if you are to find Imam al-Hussein holding on to the drapes of the Kaaba, the sanctuary that pre-Islamic Arabia honored as a peaceful sanctuary, he said, if you find him hanging on to the drapes of the Kaaba, you kill him. And so the Imam did not want blood being spilled in the Kaaba to dishonor this holy sanctuary, this peaceful sanctuary. And as we said, he sent a clear message. He left no excuse. When he leaves Mecca, when he leaves the Kaaba in this manner on his way to Iraq, there is no more excuse for anyone. Anyone, even if someone would have been neglectful, even if someone would not have followed the details, now you would have taken notice. The Imam did not leave any excuse to anyone. People should have asked, why did the Imam leave? Where is he going? What made him leave? Does he not need our help? If he's leaving because he's about to be killed in the Kaaba, should we not support him? Should we not protect him? And this is how the Imam alayhi salam did not leave an excuse for anyone. I will stop here. It's almost prayer time. Inshallah, we'll continue next night. Assalamu ala al-Hussein wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussein wa ala awlad al-Hussein wa ala ashab al-Hussein wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi al-tayyibin al-tahirin.